Good morning. We have a very interesting topic to cover over the next 20-25 minutes. We can call it mental fitness. And it's something we don't usually talk much about, but it's really important. We all know about physical fitness, right? We know that if we exercise and eat well and get good sleep and these kinds of things, don't smoke, that we live longer, we feel better, we're more productive, we're better colleagues at work. But mental fitness is just as important and in many ways more important than physical fitness. You know, over the last month as we've been watching the Olympics and you see these athletes that have been, training for years and then maybe they just miss medaling by a little bit. You never hear them say, I wasn't physically fit. You hear them say, I wasn't mentally fit. So it makes a big difference at all levels in our lives. So imagine this. Imagine there was a magic pill. A pill that you could take every morning, and it would help you sleep better. You'd have more energy. If you have feelings of anxiety or stress or depression, it would help quell those feelings. No one would know you're taking the pill. It's free to you because Impact and IW already bought it for you if you wanted. I'd take that pill. And guess what? That pill is not a Bud Light, and that pill is not a shot of tequila, and it's not an opiate, because those things don't give you those results of better sleep and better energy and better productivity and being a better husband, parent, and friend. Those don't play out that way over time. So what is this magic pill? The magic pill is mental fitness. So what we're going to do over the next few minutes is explain, well, what is mental fitness? Why does it matter to us? And how easy or hard is it to bring it into our lives? And the punchline up front is, it's remarkably easy. Physical fitness, the recommendations are that you spend 2-3 hours a week on physical fitness. There is no formal recommendation around mental fitness, but I know from personal experience and from working with many people, you can spend 10 to 15 minutes once or twice a week and make dramatic impact for yourself or for someone that you care about. So, this is the topic that we have. Now, before I get started, I want to ask you folks 2 questions. So we're going to throw some polls up. If you've got a phone with you, do me a favor, pull it out. And we're going to have these QR codes. Can't live these days without QR codes. So we're at the restaurant here and we're bringing up the menu. So the first question is, let's say that a friend of yours, someone that you're pretty close to, a family member, a colleague that you work closely with, let's say that you feel they're struggling with something, a mood disorder, what we can call a mental health or mental wellness issue. How likely are you to offer help? Would you always do that? Usually, sometimes, rarely, never. We can be totally honest. Nobody knows who's answering these questions. So we're going to bring up the QR code. And when you go there, it'll have the question, so you didn't have to memorize that. And again, this is someone that you know and that you care about. And they're struggling with something. Are you going to offer to help? Whatever that might be, just spend some time with them if they need to talk, help them figure out what to do. So take a moment. I love these little polling questions. In fact, we can bring them up. Let's bring up the answers because they just show up real time. You want to advance to the results? Okay, so looks like we have a very caring and nice group here. Looks like we've got, what would that be, 70, 85. We've got roughly 85% of people in this room would always or most of the time usually offer to help. And I think that's what we would hope to see. So that's wonderful. I just have one more question. So let's go to the next question. The next question is very similar. And it's the same question, but it is about you. Let's say that you're struggling. You recognize that you have something that's not going quite right. You suddenly find yourself getting angry easier. You're drinking a lot more. You're feeling withdrawn. How likely are you to seek help? Always? Usually? Sometimes? Rarely? Never. Same question, but now we're turning the lens the other way. And we can bring up the results whenever you guys are ready. You guys got the QR code, right? You had enough time to see the code? Yep. All right, let's see what that looks like. Yep. So, kind of like we might all have expected this a little bit. So, we're still real close to that 80% number, except it got switched. 80% of us in this room rarely or never seek help. We'll do it for a friend. We'll do it for our spouse, our kids, our colleagues. But we don't do it for ourselves. And this is the essence of our topic. This is what matters. We need to be kind to ourselves. We need to realize that when we're struggling, there are people that want to help, and there are things you can do that don't involve other people, meaning on your own, in private, that works to help. And that's what I'm going to show you in the next few minutes. Okay, so let's look at a couple of stats. There are only like 2 slides on stats, but it's good to just get a sense of this. I think you folks know this, but you're in a very tough profession. Right? I mean, it's physically demanding. It's not every individual that can be walking around on some steel beam 1,000 feet up in the air. Right? I'm sure there are plenty of alpha males and females in this room. And there's a certain aura, there's a certain gravitas that comes with that. Strength. So I can well understand how the issues of stigma and not wanting to feel like that person that's going for help. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious that people are going to be a little sensitive around that. But there are things you can do. First of all, you can just embrace the fact that seeking help is not weak. It's actually a sign of strength. But second, there are a lot of things you can do privately on your own, as you'll see. So let's look at some of these stats. Sadly, the construction trade is number 1 in overdose deaths of all trades, and number 2 in suicide rate. 8 in 10 people that suffer from anxiety and depression haven't seen a professional in the last year. And you can see the stats on the construction trades represent 7.5% of the workforce, but have double and triple the overdose deaths and suicides in terms of rates. So that's very sobering. I just wanted to get it out there. This is you folks. And there's a piece of very interesting good news, though. And that is that 3 out of 4 people that have mental distress don't really want therapy or medication. They don't want to go see a professional. What they want to know is what they can do for themselves or someone they care about, a colleague, a family member, that's going to work. And the scientific term for that is evidence-based self-care. And that's what you have, and that's what I'm going to show you. That's what's available to you right now. Just to give you a general stat, this is general population, not your trade. About half of people, adults in the United States, have a diagnosable mental health condition in their lifetime. Half. And about 20% every given year, a little bit more. And that's diagnosable. People can have symptoms, and hasn't reached a clinical significance of being a diagnosis. So you can have some anxiety, some stress, some sleep deprivation, etc. When you start adding that in, we are talking about 75+% of the population. We're not talking about them. We're talking about us. Us in this room, our family members, our colleagues. So just understand, this topic we can't have it feel foreign. We need to embrace this and get strong with it. Okay, so why do people not sort of seek care? Well, these are just some of the reasons, so you have it. Feelings of shame, stigma, judgment by peers, maybe some job consequences, and unsure where to find access. So how do we address that? One more thing in terms of background that's interesting. let's say that you have a colleague that you work with. You might think that depression or anxiety or stress would show up in a certain way, meaning the person you might think they're more withdrawn or something like that. But actually, what's going on the inside can manifest very differently on the outside. And I say this so you can recognize it in others, but also so you can recognize it in yourself. Behaviors like suddenly tons of sports betting, obsession with work, all of a sudden having lots of headaches and physical complaints, substance misuse for sure, aggressive behavior. When these things haven't been there, these are all signs of something going on inside. So it's just to be aware, again, partly of yourself. That's in particular for men. So we've already established that you show up for others. But can you show up for yourself? So these are some of the tools that you have available. And I want to take a moment and just compliment the leadership, Impact, and IWU, because you are the first national, international union that has invested in the tools that I'm about to show you. And they work. They're science-based. Your leadership is taking this on. But we need to do our part as well. So in your platform, your Impact platform, it's technically an app if you think about it that way, right there on the home page is something called CredibleMind. And I'm just going to describe very briefly in like 2 minutes what's here. My goal here is to destigmatize and demystify what's here. This is like really normal things. I was talking to a guy who was part of the Teamsters, and he said something really interesting. He said, he was an engineer, and he said, I fix things for a living. And he said, you're giving me the tools so I can fix myself. I can do that. Just give me the tools. I don't need to go see somebody. Just tell me what I need to do. That's what these are. So what's here when you start bouncing around? There are 3 or 4 things I want to tell you about. The first is there are assessments. There are about 20 of them. Average assessment takes 2 to 3, max 4 minutes. What does it do? You answer a few questions, you pick the topic, and it gives you a sense of what your risk is. So if you think you have a sleep problem, if you think you have a substance misuse problem, or you're feeling anxious, stressed, depressed, etc., there are about 20 of these. You can go in the app here, and you can pick one. There's a list. You can pick as many as you want. But it only takes 2 or 3 minutes. Answer a few questions, and you see what your risk is. And nobody knows that you took it. We can't see who takes what. All we can see is the aggregated data. I'm actually going to show you the results of some of the aggregated data. But please know how secure this is and how private it is. I use this for myself. I've used this for my kids and coworkers. So the assessments are there, and they're probably the most popular tool. Interesting thing, when people have sort of low risk, they tend not to do anything else. They just feel comfortable, like, oh, good. I don't really have a problem there. That's something going on outside of me. This is unlikely to be a risk. Medium risk, they tend to go into self-care. They go into what I'm going to tell you in a minute. They look for some videos or podcasts that help them with that topic. And then people with higher risk tend to start looking for some professional help, like a therapist or seeking medication. So it's sort of a natural triage. You choose each step of the way. No one's pushing you in any direction. So these are the kind of tools that are available. I just want to tell you 1 or 2 stories of people that use these, because we get the stories all the time. And I'll start with myself. I have a son who's been diagnosed with anxiety and ADHD. He's had medication, he's had therapy, and it really wasn't working real well. He said he didn't feel great with those approaches. So when our system became available, I said, well, let's try it. So I sat down with my son and we looked up anxiety, and we found out there are 17 things you can do on your own to reduce feelings of anxiety. His therapist hadn't told him about all of these. I'm not knocking therapists, they have their approach. You can spend more time in nature, reduces anxiety. There are all kinds of things but for him, and for each of us, there's usually the 1 or 2 things that really will make the difference. And one of the things on the list was getting a good night's sleep. And we were looking at the list, and he goes, yeah, Dad, I don't sleep well, I never have. And I said, what? I felt terrible as a parent. I didn't know my son didn't sleep well and hadn't for years. And sure enough, right on the spot, we downloaded an app that had already been vetted by a clinical team, so it's good. There are over 20,000 videos, apps, podcasts, articles, books, all of this stuff that has been vetted. So all you see is the good stuff. This isn't some Google search where there's, or TikTok video or something. He downloaded the app. He sleeps much better. No more meds. No more therapy. And I can just tell you story after story where people come in feeling that there's something they can't get around, and then they find a list of things you can do, click a button, find a resource, watch a video or two. I mean, here's one that sounds kind of funny, but it was pretty serious for this colleague of mine. When their in-laws would come visit over the holidays, it apparently was incredibly stressful for them. They hated it, and it impacted them and their family. There's material in here to help with that. Setting boundaries. What are the issues? What's the language? There's a man who thought his son might be suicidal, but he didn't know how to even bring it up. The material is right there to say, here's how you talk to a family member about suicide. So these things are here. They work. They're invisible to everyone else. They don't take very long. An assessment, 2, 3, 4 minutes. And then if you want to click on a few videos, you might get up to 10 or 15 minutes. Try this a couple of times over the next month. See if it works for you. And again, completely confidential. The other thing that's in here is there's a list of what's available to you locally. So at your local, who are contact people. And there's also hotlines. Sometimes people need immediate help. That's here too. So you can click in, and right at the top of the page in red is a hotline where you can get help. And I'll tell you, people use that, and it makes a huge difference. So let's take a look at what you folks have been doing, because this launched a year ago. I know this probably sounds new to many of you, but it's been going on now. We've kind of had the soft launch. So just under 2,500 iron workers and contractors and family members have been using the system. You can see the top topics: stress, addiction, suicide, anxiety, depression. But there are literally dozens and dozens of other topics. The assessments, substance misuse and depression are way up there. There's one there called the mental health check-in. That takes 12 minutes. That's the only one that's longer. It covers 15 different scales. So in one swoop, you can it's like the whole physical checkup, but it's your mental health checkup. So you can do that. It takes about 12 minutes. And at the end of these little reports, by the way, it doesn't just tell you your risk. It gives you recommended resources based on your risk. So it makes it pretty easy. Does it work? Over 90% of people using the system say, thumbs up, I'd refer it to a friend, it was helpful. Of those that had some risk in their profiles, about over 2/3 go on and find a resource. And over half of people using the system are saying they're making positive behavior change. This is the holy grail. Positive behavior change, this is a big deal. This means I am actually sleeping better. I'm feeling less angry. I feel like I'm a better parent, whatever it is, better coworker. So this stuff works. Now I want to give you a thought which is really kind of interesting. Most people don't talk about this. It's just relatively new. And I want to draw a sports analogy. If you're coaching a football team and all you do is play defense, you're not going to win. I mean, defense is probably more important than offense, but you still need offense. Some offense. So all we've been talking about is playing defense. All we've been saying is, if there's something bothering you, what can you do about it? But what do you do to actually move forward towards more happiness, more productivity, more energy? How do you feed the positive side? Again, sort of more of a scientific term, how do you build resilience? So there's a guy named Corey Keyes over at Emory University, and he came up with a very simple diagram to kind of convey all of this. And he said, look, in the old days, this was the paradigm. You either didn't have a mental illness, that's over on the right, or you do have a mental illness like depression or PTSD or an eating disorder. And they're labels, they're little dots along that line. And nobody, absolutely nobody feels that captures who they are. So we said, we need another line. The vertical line has at the top of it the word flourishing. You could also call that mental fitness. You can call that well-being, self-actualization. So you can use the term you want, but the idea is you feel you're living your full life. And the bottom is you're not. You're languishing. Now this is much more interesting because you can be anywhere on this grid. And wherever you are on this horizontal line, meaning you can have a mental illness, you can still flourish. Having a mental illness does not mean you don't get to flourish. You can. And by the way, if you have no mental illness, that doesn't mean you are flourishing. You can languish. I used to make a joke, you haven't met my brother, but I don't say that anymore. But the idea is that the goal for all of us, wherever we are, is to move up towards more happiness and productivity and energy, and to the right, which means mitigating the symptoms of whatever mental health issue is challenging us. And if you're interested, and this is all in the system. So in the system is not just information about mental fitness on the defensive side. All of this flourishing material is there. There's a flourishing assessment. I think it takes 3 or 4 minutes. You can see where you are on that scale and what it recommends. There's actually a course on flourishing that's part of your system. And it takes longer, but there are 6 modules. It turns out that this sort of flourishing happiness science, and there's a lot of science around this. Statistically, it's extremely strong, very highly correlated as people answer questions and go through these processes. There are 4 components towards basically this living a full life. There's emotional well-being, which basically just means you're not letting things trigger immediate emotions and bringing you down and make you angry and make you sad. You regulate some of the emotional, you buffer some of the emotional reactions that you have. A second is psychological well-being. That's directly dealing with a mental health diagnosis, for example. A third is social well-being. We are social creatures. Social connectivity is huge. It may not be what you think. I was very surprised when I took this module. There are 3 different layers of social connectivity. It's not just, is there some bud that I can talk to about things? It's more than that. There's different levels of social connectivity, and there are things you can do easily that strengthen, reinforce, and increase those bonds. And then finally, there's some kind of spiritual or contemplative piece. That could be organized religion. That could be meditation. That could be just spending more time in nature. Maybe your peace, your spiritual peace, is fishing. But the idea is to find it. And these dimensions can help you build resilience and be a better partner in your life, better colleague, and you'll just feel better. So, let me wrap up with a couple of things. First, a major recognition of the IWU and impact for establishing the leadership to invest in this, again, first time for a large national, international union, recognizing the importance of mental fitness. This is a big deal, and it's a huge opportunity. And I'm with CredibleMind, and we work with Siegel-Benz, and we're the partners that are helping with all of this, and we are deeply thankful for our partnership with you folks and the opportunity to help. But you folks need to do your part. It's all here. And it is anonymous. I want to emphasize this one more time. Nobody knows when you go onto the site and you take these assessments or you click, and it's available to your families. It's available to all union workers and contractors and their families. And so whether there's an issue at home, because things at home impact things at work, or whether it's at work, you can go onto this system, and I would challenge you this way. I would say just give it a try. This takes far less time than physical fitness, and it could have far bigger impact for you personally. So make a commitment. Take 5 to 10 minutes, 2-3 times in the next month. This is right on, you have a handout, I understand it was put on all of your chairs here, called Love Every Local. Here's the website. Here's a little description. So this is your invitation to begin the change. And you know, what we do for ourselves impacts how we show up for others. Culture is how we treat other people around us. So let's be kind to ourselves. We already saw we're kind to others. Let's be kind to ourselves. Let's give this a try. Let's give space to other people that might need some help and might want to use these tools. And together we can change that culture. And as a team, become that much more productive and happy. Thank you.